The country of Brazil, home of the mighty Amazon forest, conjures up many images. Some of the images are unpleasant, such as logging roads and giant forest fires deliberately lit by settlers. But Brazil is also a fascinating country and contains some of the wildest places left on the planet. Brazil is also the location of a unique partnership this year between the Nature Conservancy, the Earth Foundation, and students and teachers from over 7,000 schools. This coalition is in a race against time to save the last of the world's rainforests.
Hello, my name is Kurt Clemenson. I'm the director of the Earth Foundation, which is dedicated to protecting our natural world. The Earth Foundation and our partner, the Nature Conservancy, are thrilled with the results of this year's Adopt an Acre project. Because of your participation, we've been able to set aside 67,000 acres of tropical forest and wetlands in the Pantanal of Brazil. This is such a large expanse that it's difficult to imagine the size of the area protected. Imagine an area of 70,000 football fields or 100 average-sized farms in the Midwest. This is proof that a group of committed students and teachers can truly make a huge difference. The Earth Foundation is going to use your inspiring story as it negotiates with governments to end the destruction of the rainforests. Now, I'd like to explore with you the wildlife and habitat that your t-shirt sales have helped to protect. And I went to Brazil in January to film the Pantanal, but before reaching that region was able to travel to a number of areas of the country. And during my journey, I encountered many interesting sights and learned a lot about Brazil.
About the size of the United States, Brazil is similar in many respects to the U.S. and completely different in others. Brazil's 25 states, for example, are exactly half the number that we have in the U.S. And while both countries were colonized by Europeans, today English is the primary language in the U.S., while Portuguese is spoken in Brazil. Both the U.S. and Brazil practiced slavery in the past. While it was located in the south in the United States, it was mostly found in the northern states of Brazil. Bahia, Rio de Janeiro, and other states have large populations of Afro-Brazilians. Today there are many who still wear the traditional African dress. The slaves developed a famous form of martial arts called capoeira. This practice was kept secret from the slave masters for fear of severe punishment. And today, some of the best athletes in Brazil are the capoeira martial artists. Over 1 million Japanese immigrated to Brazil this century, settling in the state of Sao Paulo. This is the largest population of Japanese outside of the country of Japan. The southern and central states of Brazil were settled by pioneers from Germany, Poland, the Ukraine, and other northern European countries. Settled by Germans in 1860, the city of Blumenau, with its half-timber houses, looks as if it were transported from Bavaria. In fact, if it weren't for the palm trees, you would easily mistake this as a scene from Europe. The largest number of immigrants, however, came from Italy. The city of Florianopolis translates as the City of Flowers in Italian and is just one of the many beautiful coastal cities in Brazil. In fact, by far the majority of Brazilians live along the Atlantic Ocean and seem to really love the beach.
In many ways, Brazil is similar to Australia. With 8,000 kilometers of beautiful beaches, many people actively participate in water sports.
During January, which is summer in the southern hemisphere, the people of Brazil flock to the beach by the millions and pursue every beach sport imaginable. And Brazil now produces world champion volleyball teams and surfers. As I said, everyone seems to love the beach. Of course, soccer is everywhere, especially since Brazil won the World Cup in 1995. And like people all over the world, many of the young people love American culture, including our movies, fast food, and sports.
In many ways, however, Brazil is completely different than anything you've ever seen.
Sadly, the arrival of European colonists in Brazil resulted in the deaths of millions of Indians, similar to the genocide that occurred in the United States. Still others have been assimilated into the larger culture. The Amazon basin, however, still shelters thousands of indigenous people who live much as their ancestors have for thousands of years. Today, the people of Brazil are more aware of environmental concerns than they were just a few years ago. One city that is world-renowned for its quality of life and low environmental impact is Curitiba. Every day, 75% of the 2 million inhabitants use mass transit. The elongated buses are unique, as are the long plexiglass tubes that shelter riders during the rainy season. The city also has a huge recycling program. This botanical garden takes in young homeless people and trains them in gardening. And there are 100 small lighthouses spread throughout the city, which are in reality neighborhood libraries for students. Government officials have come from all over the world to learn from this beautiful, well-planned city. Brazilians are also gaining awareness about the importance of their rainforests. One of the areas that has suffered greatly during the past 200 years of agricultural expansion is the Atlantic rainforest. Only 3% of this magnificent ecosystem remains. Whereas much of the destruction of the Amazon rainforest has been to create cattle ranches, here in the Atlantic rainforest, water buffalo have been introduced with the same destructive results.
The Nature Conservancy has funded a project to protect part of the remaining Atlantic forest.
As is usually the case, our trip to visit the Atlantic rainforest involved the crossing of numerous rivers and creeks. Four-wheel drive is absolutely necessary to get around out here. This area is home to numerous endangered species, including the Amazonas brasileñas parrots, of which only about 4,000 remain. Over 1,000 birds, or a quarter of the remaining parrots, nest on this island at night. This was an unbelievable experience sitting in our boat as the sun set as we watched flock after flock of returning parrots. Unfortunately, the large trees favored by local fishermen to build their canoes is the same one that the parrots nest in. Recently, ISPN has been educating the fishermen about alternative materials for boat building. The forest is also home to the black-faced lion tamarin monkey, a species only just discovered in 1991. It's amazing that this new species was found less than 100 miles from Sao Paulo, a city of over 18 million inhabitants. Imagine if we were to discover a new species of mammal 100 miles from New York or LA. This area has been set aside by a Brazilian cosmetics company that donates a percentage of its sales to conservation. In addition to funding conservation, their employees, many who are fashion models or cosmetic consultants, spend time in the rainforest performing volunteer services such as trail maintenance. Iguaçu Falls was certainly a highlight of our trip to Brazil. I've wanted to visit this area for over 20 years and finally had the opportunity. Iguaçu Falls shares a border with Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay, and dwarfs Niagara Falls here in the United States. As you can see, the water entering the river that creates this giant falls flows from the hundreds of thousands of acres of rainforest park that has been preserved by the governments of Brazil and Argentina.
Well, I hope that this brief segment has given you a general understanding and appreciation for Brazil. Now it's time to head to the Pantanal, which means large swampland in Portuguese. The Pantanal is the world's largest wetlands and the site of this year's Adopt an Acre project.
It's amazing that few people have heard of the Pantanal, since this is one of the last intact ecological paradises left on the planet. The rich wildlife concentrations compare with anything I've ever seen, even in Africa. In some ways, the Pantanal is similar to the Everglades of Florida. Both provide water filtration and flood control for large areas. They are also very rich in nutrients for fish and wildlife. The Pantanal and the Everglades also share many of the same species, especially wading birds. However, the quantity of wildlife in the Pantanal is extraordinary. For example, in 1993 there were only 40 pair of wood storks in the Everglades. The Pantanal had in excess of 4,000 pairs, or over 100 times more than the Everglades. Another difference is that while the Florida Everglades once covered 13,000 square miles, or the southern quarter of Florida, 1,400 miles of canals have reduced them to a fraction of their previous grandeur. At 72,000 square miles, the Pantanal is larger than the state of Colorado and is in relatively pristine condition. To begin our trip, we flew from Sao Paulo on the coast to Cuiabá, a city of 400,000 inhabitants on the edge of the Pantanal. Early the next morning, the adventure began.
We're just getting ready to enter the Pantanal, where we're going to be driving all day on this gravel road, hundreds of kilometers to where we're heading in the ranch. And we'll be stopping periodically throughout the day to film birds and other wildlife we find in this area.
Just as the day is divided into dark and light, the Pantanal is divided into wet and dry seasons. The rains begin in October, and by March, a giant wetlands of rivers, lakes, ponds, marshes, and swamplands averaging 7 feet deep cover the land. Small patches of forested higher ground are filled with wildlife. Although this is an extremely beautiful panoramic scene, during the rainy season the air is literally alive with mosquitoes. During the dry season, the rivers recede until they are thin ribbons of water. Fortunately, the mosquitoes also seemingly vanish. The huge schools of fish spawned in the flooded grasslands now are concentrated in small lagoons and ponds. Many South American ecosystems come together in the Pantanal. Plants and animals from the Amazon and Atlantic rainforests to the north and south, and the Cerrado and Chaco grasslands on the east and west converge and overlap. 3 major flyways pass through, bringing wood storks from the Argentine pampas to the south, and flycatchers from the western slopes of the Andes, and ospreys and yellowlegs from the wetlands of North America. There are also significant populations of the large mammals representative of the rainforests, including jaguars, ocelots, pumas, tapirs. There are healthy populations of maned wolves, which are very rare or extinct in its other habitats. Marsh deer, just one of several deer species found here, giant otters, giant anteaters, and giant armadillos, each the largest of its kind in South America. Much like the recovery of the alligator in the Everglades and other parts of the U.S. thanks to the Endangered Species Act, is the recovery of the caiman, a crocodilian species in the Pantanal.
You know, in spite of an international treaty that bans the trade in products like this, as many as 1 million caimans a year were killed for their skins in the 1980s. However, since 1993, a combination of Brazil's efforts against poachers, a ban on the skin trade in neighboring Paraguay, and a worldwide campaign against caiman skin products has ended this slaughter.
The caiman population, as a result, is now up to 10 million, a real conservation success story. Caimans eat piranhas. As the caiman population has increased, the fierce piranhas have decreased to natural levels, taking pressure off other species of fish. Another species that is now rarer in other habitats is the capybara. These pig-sized rodents are actually like giant rats and can reach up to 110 pounds. Huge packs of capybaras dot the landscape and show relatively little fear of humans, indicating they are not being hunted. Of the 4 species of blue macaws, only the hyacinth is still found in large numbers, again here in the Pantanal. Even the anaconda is still quite common. Although the reticulated python is longer, the anaconda is much thicker. Anacondas can get up to 30 feet in length and weigh up to 265 pounds. This snake was large enough to kill a caiman. As we drove further into the Pantanal, we stopped to let this guy cross the road.
99% of the land in the Pantanal is privately owned, and much of it is held as fazendas, a Portuguese word for large ranch. I have friends in Texas who have large ranches, but few of them can match the 1,000 square mile spreads that we find out here. We were actually quite lucky to see a cattle drive during the rainy season, since this activity is usually restricted to the dry season. These are zebu cattle, a hardy breed that does well under extreme conditions. As you know, cattle ranching in the Americas has fueled the destruction of the rainforests, so it's truly ironic that cattle ranching in the Pantanal has probably been its salvation. Ranchers, called fazenderos, used to hunt wildlife, especially larger species such as jaguars. However, as the number of animals decreased, the ranchers realized that the wildlife was something they really wanted around. Today, many are ardent conservationists. Also, ranchers cannot have more cattle than the land will support in the rainy season when 90% of the land is underwater. This has prevented the problem of overgrazing. This cowboy is drinking the official drink of the region, mate tea. Nutritional scientists tell us that mate is great for your health, acting as an immune system stimulant, and is available here in the U.S. from health food stores. These large ranches are like a place that time forgot.
They're almost completely self-sufficient, making their own saddles and tack, growing their own food, and also raising their own transportation. Slowly but surely, however, things from the modern world have begun to creep into their lives. I still think the old ways might be the best. After all, when was the last time that you saw a horse that had to be pulled out of the mud by a jeep? Unfortunately, there are threats to the Pantanal. For example, the 550 square mile park has only 3 full-time employees. Thankfully, Director Benjamin Diaz da Silva no longer has shootouts with caiman poachers. However, he still has his hands full with problems of commercial overfishing and trapping of cats and the occasional otter.
However, longer term, there is a threat that could damage or alter much of this area. 4 countries of the region, Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay, have signed a free trade agreement called the Mercosur. Similar to NAFTA between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, Mercosur has as its goal the development of more trade between these 4 countries.
As a part of Mercosur, a project has been proposed to facilitate year-round navigation in the Paraguay-Paraná river system. This project is called the Hidrovia. Although boats already navigate the rivers, the proposal is to dredge the rivers to accommodate larger boats, more shipping traffic, and more volume of exports and imports. Ocean-going vessels would travel through landlocked Paraguay, and Bolivia would have an inland seaport. Again, it is feared that the increased water flow throughout the year would deplete all of the water during the dry season and leave the wildlife without enough to survive.
Recently, because of the global outcry by conservationists, the governments of the region have stated they will not do anything that will cause environmental harm to the Pantanal, and will limit their efforts to navigational aids such as special lighting and buoys along the river to aid shipping.
Environmentalists, however, fear that the original project has not died. Hydrologists, which are scientists that study water systems, believe that rocky ledges in the Paraguay River act to slow the wet season outflow. They fear that dredging or blasting these areas could alter the delicate water dynamic, allowing water to flow out at an accelerated rate and leaving no water for the wildlife during the dry season.
The Earth Foundation is working with our friends at International Rivers Network, who are monitoring the area as well as organizing the communities that would be affected by any alteration in the ecology of the Pantanal. If plans should surface that would threaten this area, we would make it a priority letter writing campaign. As you know, students' letters have been very effective at stopping or changing destructive development projects in the past.
Another industry that we found on the edge of the Pantanal is gold mining. Although still small in scope, these open-pit mines are like giant sores, and the chemicals, including mercury, that are used in the mining process are very damaging to the environment. This area was so rich in gold that the mining company built a new church so that they could tear down the old church to extract the ore found in the adobe walls that had been made from the local soil. Finally, as we neared the end of the Trans-Pantanal Road, we came across this, fishing Pantanal style. In case you're wondering, those are tarantulas on his back. I have no idea why they're there.
Morning. This is where we spent the evening. It's an old hacienda, or fazenda in Portuguese, at the end of the Trans-Pantanal Highway. It's being converted for ecotourism. They expect a lot of tourists eventually to be coming into this area, and hopefully the tourism will help to support the conservation of the area. It took us all day to get in here. It was a fascinating drive. We're in the middle of the rainy season, as you can see, and the downside to that is there's a lot of mosquitoes. The upside is there's just not very many people out here. We basically have it to ourselves. We saw a lot of wildlife yesterday. That was one huge anaconda, and we expect to see a whole lot more today. Basically, we're going to be getting in a boat and going up the Curiaba River, headed to the property that the Nature Conservancy has acquired this year, and we'll be filming again from there.
After a good night's sleep, we were up early loading a boat for the final segment of our journey. We would cruise upriver for the next 3.5 hours. This area feels like the end of the earth. The number of birds and other wildlife such as howler monkeys was truly impressive, and they showed no fear of us whatsoever, again indicating that there's little hunting in the region. In fact, the Pantanal is home to almost 700 species of birds, including toucans, guan, hummingbirds, curassow, parrots, kingfishers, woodpeckers, and hundreds of songbirds. It is also home to the rhea, South America's version of the ostrich. In addition, almost 600 species of fish have been recorded in the rivers, as well as freshwater lobsters and stingrays evolved from saltwater varieties trapped by geological events millions of years ago. Thousands of species of plants cover the Pantanal, from the really strange to common grasses. Plants normally associated with abundant water often thrive just meters away from species more commonly found on the surrounding dry plateau. And of course, it also has its share of interesting reptiles and snakes. As we neared the Adopt an Acre site, the amount of wildlife in the water, forests, and air was simply amazing. And finally we arrived.
If you're looking on your map, you'll see an area that's shaped just like this. This is the state of Mato Grosso. Now right below that is Mato Grosso del Sur, which is another state. We started a couple days ago in the city of Cuiabá with our truck ride and then later on a boat ride. The area that's outlined here in yellow is a 30 million acre water conservation area drained by the river Cuiabá. This area in green here is actually the Pantanal National Park. It's about a 340,000 acre piece of property that's been protected. Now, the Nature Conservancy has actually acquired two ranches. The first one is the Durache Ranch, north here, about 81,500 acres. Where we're at currently and where our Adopt an Acre project is funding is the Curacao Ranch right below here, which is about a 67,000 acre piece of property that actually butts up against the country of Bolivia. In fact, Bolivia is right behind me over the mountains. We're here with Bill Pasillo. Bill is the director for the Nature Conservancy's Brazil program. Bill, it's good to see you.
Great to see you, Chris.
So can you tell us a little bit about how the land was identified that you acquired?
Yes, about 4 years ago, the Nature Conservancy decided that it was important for us to focus on the Pantanal because of the rich biological resources that are found here. It's very rich in wildlife, and we didn't know how to get started. So we, in partnership with our Brazilian partner, the Acre Foundation, we began a rapid ecological assessment. A rapid ecological assessment brings together a group of scientists, American scientists and Brazilian scientists, to look at aerial images, remote sense images from space of the Pantanal, and to also look at the biological resources on the ground using global positioning systems. We do a systematic survey in the area around the Pantanal National Park to identify these areas of importance and to get a handle on very quickly what the resource base is like.
And were there scientists on the ground also then who were actually doing physical counts of species?
Yeah, there were 6 scientists who actually came out and spent quite a bit of time in both the wet season and the dry season here in the Pantanal.
So they had to put up with these mosquitoes also?
They definitely had to put up with the mosquitoes.
Okay, great.
So in doing this rapid ecological assessment, we recognized that in the wet season, this 340,000 acre Pantanal National Park was almost entirely, 70% of it is inundated, underwater. And that during this time, the wildlife that's found there, particularly the large mammals, needed a place to migrate to.
And what were some of those mammals?
Oh, the mammals like the most important one is the spotted jaguar, but there are also deer here, the giant anteater, and a whole host of other mammal species that are found in the area. It's very, very rich in wildlife because people have not hunted wildlife in the Pantanal. It's been an area for 300 years where we've had cattle grazing, and so there's not been this need to hunt wildlife to feed the families in the Pantanal. So you find there's a really intact ecosystem.
Great.
And in identifying the need to protect drier area because of the need for these animal species, the wildlife, to migrate to drier areas in the wet season, we looked at a couple critical parcels around the Pantanal National Park. And we identified 3 top priority areas. 2 in the upper portion above the Pantanal National Park, and 1 below the Fazenda Curacao, which is a mountainous area below the Pantanal National Park, across on the other side of the Paraguay River. And we began to piece together an acquisition program, a management plan for not only the Cuiabá River watershed, but this smaller area, which is actually quite large, at the bottom of the watershed for protection.
For the next 3 days, we explored some of the site. All of this area, so rich in wildlife, has been saved forever because of your efforts. The property also has very interesting signs of prehistoric occupation by Paleo-Indian tribes who inhabited the region thousands of years ago. Finally, it was time to fly out. I was excited because the plane would give us a good perspective of the ranch's importance to the conservation of wildlife. Here we see the ranch buildings almost at the very edge of the mountain range. These mountains are crucial to protection of the great mammals of the Pantanal. We are still uncertain about the magnitude of the threat to the Pantanal by the Hidrovia project. One encouraging sign is the large number of articles of concern that have been written in recent weeks. Also, as a major landowner in the region, the Nature Conservancy will have a voice in the future of the region. We can rest assured, however, that the combined 1/2 million acres of the Pantanal National Park and the Adopt an Acre properties will provide a secure home for the wildlife in years to come.
This summer, I'll be traveling to Central and South America to explore possibilities for next year's Adopt an Acre campaign. I'll also be shooting a complete new version of our rainforest educational video with lots of exciting live footage. Teachers will be contacted at the end of the summer to book either the rainforest or coral reef curriculum. I hope that you're as excited about the coming projects as we are here at the Earth Foundation. And I also want to encourage each and every one of you to set a goal of traveling with the Earth Foundation someday on an eco-adventure of a lifetime.
I'll also be leading a number of groups of students and teachers who will accompany us on one of our eco-education adventures to the rainforest. And hopefully we'll be able to add the Fazenda, the site of this year's Adopt an Acre in the Pantanal, to our list of tours this next year. If you'd like information on the adventure of a lifetime traveling with the Earth Foundation to the rainforests, please call our 1-800 number. The fact is that every single one of you, if you really set your mind to it, can one day visit a rainforest with the Earth Foundation.
As I stated at the beginning of our trip into the Pantanal, this exquisite natural paradise is almost completely unknown by the average person. Not only here in the United States, but even in Brazil. And I'm elated to have had the opportunity to share some of that magnificence with you. This video report from the Earth Foundation and the Nature Conservancy certificate is a small token of our appreciation. From all of the citizens of the Earth, consider this a much-deserved thank you.